What's one myth about leadership you wish people would stop believing?
That there's a mold of what a good leader looks like.
What's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Treat everyone with dignity and respect.
What leadership habit creates the biggest long-term impact?
Self-reflection.
Welcome to I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Conversations on leadership, faith, and resilience with Mike Turner. This show is proudly sponsored by Alamo Tech and Mission Solution Partners.
Welcome back to another episode of Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Today, we have Kathy Eastwood. Kathy Eastwood is a leadership strategist, executive advisor, and creator of the E3 Leadership Code. It's a human-centered leadership framework designed to help organizations deliver consistent performance through trust, clarity, alignment, and disciplined execution. Her career began as a CPA at EY before evolving into leadership, spanning operations, technology, people leadership, executive strategy, and organizational transformation. Over the years, Kathy's held senior executive positions, including Chief of Staff, Chief People Officer, and Chief Operating Officer across enterprises, organizations, startups, and private equity-backed companies. After witnessing firsthand how toxic leadership environments damage both people and business outcomes, Kathy dedicated her work to helping executives lead differently. Her approach combines emotional intelligence with operational discipline, helping leaders achieve measurable business results without sacrificing culture or trust. Her upcoming book, The E3 Leadership Code, A Human Approach to High Performance, shares real-world leadership lessons and practical guidance for leaders seeking sustainable success in high-pressure environments. Kathy, that was a mouthful, but welcome to my show. I'm just so glad to have you on here, and I really did want to talk with you because of your resume. So thanks again for having you on here.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
Well, my guest audience is going to want to dive into your book and all that fun stuff. But before we get into all that, I really do want to just kind of understand a little bit about your background and kind of what kind of got you started, how things kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start there.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned in the introduction that I started my career as a CPA. You know, someone had said if you're good with accounting when I was in college, then you should, go in to become a CPA. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. And I was working for Ernst & Young for about 3 years. And it's funny, I was just talking to one of my first bosses last night, and we were talking about the experience. And it was a great experience. It's like consulting. It was like advising. You learned how companies worked. And, it was a great introduction to the business world. But I stayed about 3 years, got my certification, and then went into private accounting. And that's when I learned, Mike, that I don't like routine. I get bored very quickly.
Yeah.
And when I learned that about myself, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be an accountant. This is not my trajectory.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to work for a software company where I got to implement a software package. And that changed how I thought about getting things done, how I like to work with different people. And that led me down this path. I was doing consulting work, then I was doing pre-sales work. Suddenly I'm working in R&D and helping them solve problems as a chief of staff. So I was always getting drawn to where change was happening and getting involved with that to help drive that change. And so that's really, each opportunity there was, it was chief of staff, then I left corporate and I went and became a chief people officer. And then eventually I was like, oh, what do I want to do next? What do I want to do when I grow up, Mike? And it came up with that I wanted to partner with execs that want to drive change, but know that people are key to their success.
All right. So let's go back a little bit. So you kind of started doing this new method of actually solving problems, obviously deploying software, all that fun technical stuff. So where in that did you go, man, I really need to be good at, development work, or what is it that you're, and I want to get to another piece of this too that just reminded me of something, but I want to talk a little bit about how you kind of went from CPA to this role and how that kind of transitioned.
Yeah, it was always about driving change, right?
Right.
I didn't like the routine. I wanted to make things happen. And what I started to realize is you need to make sure people are on board with you. You can't drive change if
Yeah.
people aren't engaged, right? You can't just tell them what to do. You need them to want
I
to
honestly wish I
work
had the
with you.
skills I have now, because I would have made a great storyteller, which would have been a great person to institute change. Because now I'm like, I can tell you a story and I can kind of write it out for you and we can kind of walk through it together. And that would be the best type of leader to actually move the needle. But back then I was more of an introvert and less, I was more of a doer than I was, a leader. But I think for my audience and in your community, that one of the big things I think is a takeaway is always about, can you be a good storyteller, and then can you work well with others, and meaning that can you tell a story and then get them to buy in. And so before you go to the meeting, you've got half the group, half the board, half the whatever, half the executives on board before you even introduce it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's absolutely true. And I remembered a story that really was a big turning point for me, with storytelling, with understanding the people side of it. I was a consultant for a project management software package. And I was at a client site and we were teaching project management. How do you do a work breakdown structure? Like all of this operational, you can have dependencies and blah, blah, blah. So the sponsor raises his hand and says, so Kath, how do you get someone to do each one of these tasks? And I'm like, well, they're assigned to it. They're going to do it, right? I was young at this time. I'm like, they're assigned. They will do it. And he's like, no, not necessarily. What if they don't report to you? What if it's not a priority for them? And I was like, oh. And that was so game changing for me. And he recommended a book that still I talk about a lot to this day. It's called The Deadline by Tom DeMarco. And he talks about, when you want to get anything done, it's really about resource management. It's getting people bought into what you're trying to do. You talk about storytelling, being able to say, what is that vision? Why do you want to get on board? How are you going to get on board? This is why you want to be part of it. And, suddenly that work breakdown structure changed dramatically, because I could have the best plan in the world, but if I didn't have people on board, we were never going to deliver that project.
Put it in the Smartsheet or put it in the Google Sheet or whatever. That means it's going to get done. No, you're absolutely right. And I love that because, that really reminds me, like a lot of times when I was trying to tell a story to somebody, I would say, hey, if we can get this milestone done, then you won't have to have 5 different logins anymore. Like if we could just do this, your MFA is going to start working, and and this is a big part of that. So you can literally log in with your passkey, everything will be great, and you won't have all these different. And so they start thinking, oh yeah, that's you're kind of turning it 180 degrees, going, hey, this affects you directly, and this is how it affects you. But if you knock this out for me, it also is a win for you. And I think that's a big part of it. People are kind of centered that way. And so if you can kind of relate it to them, how that affects them and it impacts them right away, I think you'll find that things get done a lot quicker.
I agree. I have a term for that, Mike. I call it the WIPM.
Yeah.
What's in it for me? So if you can understand what's in it for each person that you work with, then you translate it to why it's important to them. Not your why, because they don't care. Right? But how is it going to relate? Oh, it's going to be easier if I don't have to log in. Oh, that makes my life easier.
I love that. And you say a little bit about project management too, and I've seen some trending about that too. I'm starting to think, with AI and stuff, how much of a project manager we're going to need in the future. Like all of us are eventually going to be a project manager of our own stuff. In a lot of ways, I can really see AI kind of running, like you were saying, running all the dependencies, running all the due dates, just throwing all that out there, saying, and even calculating how much time it'll take to get this one task done, which of course means this one milestone. But yeah, to that point, I mean, even more so today, you're going to need project management skills that you didn't have before. So that's
well, the first thing that was going through my mind, I'm like, AI would help with that. But AI is not going to know that someone just lost their parent or someone is having a bad day. And so what might, in an ideal world, take an hour could take 3 hours, could take 3 days, right? there's a lot more inputs that are going to be coming into this from a personal and a humanity point of view that we really have to
Right. And
think
that's, I
about
think
as
that's why
leaders
when we
now.
first had the conversation, I was like, oh yeah, Kathy's got this. Like this whole idea that you need to be human first leaders is really, really important in today's age. We used to say that, well, technology, everyone's locked to their phone, but literally there is a competing person or competing technology out there now that really will separate the human engagement. So any leader out there that's really wanting to lead now has got to really be human first leaders. So let's talk about that. What is a human first leader? What does that look like?
It's the respect that knowing who's going to be doing the work and making sure that you figure out what's going to help them want to show up and want to engage, right? And, I think the opposite of a human first is task or
Right.
performance
Yeah.
at all costs. And that tends to be that command and
Right.
control type style. You need to do X, Y, and Z, and here's how you do it. But that isn't going to get people
Yeah.
to engage, as we were talking about. So you have to think about the human first is what is going to motivate Mike? What's going to motivate Kathy?
Right.
What's going to motivate the next
Right.
person? Because we're all different. We are
Right.
not a bot, right? And we're bringing a lot of stuff to the table. So when we feel engaged, when we have a purpose, when we feel included, right? When we feel psychologically safe, we are willing to do more. And that's what we need leadership to understand what motivates people. How do we communicate them in a way that they're going to want to engage and
Yeah.
do more than the bare
And
minimum?
and one thing too, I will add ownership. Like a lot of times, I was able to get people really engaged because I got them to buy in early, and I got them to own some of it. Meaning that I would talk about a solution and not have all the answers, and I would say, "Hey, I'm coming up with this idea," and then they would literally come up with better ideas than me, but it would be their idea. So now they're carrying some of the torch, if not the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, that's good. Can you run with that? Can we get that done? And now they owned it. So originally the idea came here, but now 2, 3, or 4 people have a stake in it, and you'll be surprised how much more they're committed now to an idea that you kind of started with, you seeded it, but then after that now it's starting to flourish into an actual project. So I would add that. So so let's talk about this. How do leaders balance accountability with empathy? So I know the two could need to come together, and leaders are thinking about it and they're going, yeah, Kathy, I get that, but I got people that are above me that don't care. They want to know why we didn't meet this deadline or why we didn't get this revenue mark or whatever the case is.
Yeah, and you have two choices, right? And you have to think about what is the most important. And I think you said it. It's accountability, it's empathy, it's all of these things that are at our fingertips as leaders that we need to look on how to use. And I often talk about leadership is about balance, right? You need to be operational. You need to be strategic. You need to have empathy, but you need to be strong. You can't just come in, there's no one mold to say this is how you show up and that's going to work, right? So, yeah, we're all under a lot of pressure, but there is a repeatable formula of when you do it right as a leader, you're going to be able to get people to be more productive, to be more engaged, to be more, they're looking for the problems before you even are, right? You said it before. If someone buys into what you're doing, they're already trying to fix the problem before it becomes a problem. And that's where I get it. When stress comes in, you tend to go after what's easy or what you need to do. But with leadership, it's really about being deliberate. It's being intentional on what you need to do, when you need to do it, and then to be able to come back to the basics over and over again when
Makes
things
sense.
get stressed.
Yeah, because I think to your point, you're building a culture, you're building this team up, but you're building a bunch of all-stars. Like they don't start out as all-stars necessarily, but by the time you're all said and done and they're bought into everything you're bought into, they're going to want to take care of you. They're not going to want leadership above you to come down on you because you didn't miss a mark. If anything, you're going to exceed those expectations every time because of the fact of how you lead a team. So, and I think that's to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I have an example of where even with my own team, my team knows my
Right.
tagline is I'm a nurturing driver, right? I want to get things done. I am like, and that can be interpreted the wrong way at times, right? They're
Yeah.
like, oh, she's being bossy again. Oh, she needs control. But I balance it with, no, I care. The reason I can be a little intense is because I want us to succeed. I want you to succeed. I want us to be better. And so they know there's that balance. But if I get out of balance, they know to call me on it. That, hey, Kath, you're a little intense today. Take a deep breath. What are we really trying to accomplish here? Is this really important? So my team is now
Right.
at times
Right.
managing me when I need it. And that's what you want to be building, those relationships and that culture of knowing how do you intend to show up? How are you being perceived when you show up? And how can people adjust accordingly and help you go back to what you intend and how
Right.
you want to
No.
show up as a leader?
And that's just amazing insight you have to that, because I think that's only coming from the fact that you've actually walked that and you have that experience. So I think that's important, because a lot of people, when I interview people and they don't have strong leadership, but that's not really what I'm interviewing for, I can see that in them, that they're coming at it from a different perspective. I'm like, well, in time you'll eventually get that. I didn't have it. You didn't have it when we first started. We started realizing that later. So let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about fractional leadership, because I think that's the new trendy thing, right? So, there's a whole new perspective from executives on this whole fractional idea. So you and I both have experience in fractional leadership roles. What makes fractional leadership effective?
I think it helps. One of the things that I've found is when you have fractional, you're in a position where you need to be very clear on what you are going to be able to deliver, and more importantly, what you're not
Okay.
going to be able to work on. Because you don't have an
Right.
unlimited pool of time, right? You have
Right.
constraints, you have guardrails. And I think that works well for both the company that's hiring a fractional leader and the fractional leader themselves, because you're then having that conversation up front
Right.
of what does good look like? What are the expectations? How do you want me to show up? How do I make a decision, if
Sure.
time is tight? And then I think also with fractional, you don't often get pulled into other things. So you then are able to stay focused on the task at hand. And you say, you
Right.
hired me to do this, and I'm going to do this really well. And so I think you set up, in my opinion, you set up the guardrails in a much better way that we don't tend to do
Right,
when we
because
hire
you
full-time
you
people.
feel like you have a salaried employee that's coming on 40, 50 hours a week or whatever, and you're like, okay, I have a general job description for them to accomplish. Whereas when we come in, there's some really, I spend probably more time defining my contract with them and explaining it, and before we even execute, right? It's quite a bit of scope of work. It's understanding. It's what value I bring. So here's what you're going to get for what you're paying for. Those kind of things. So I think that's really important. And I think leadership should really listen up on this, because if you're an organization that couldn't afford a C-suite type person, but you want a C-suite because you understand the value they bring, you should absolutely look at fractional, because you can get that with a fractional price tag, obviously fractional hours, but that's a real win for you. So if you need a people officer or a COO or any other number of hats that we can kind of carry in fractional, that's really important. I think that's right, kind of the key there.
I agree,
Okay.
but I'm gonna add one more to that, Mike, right? It's also when you're fractional, you're seeing multiple scenarios, right? You're bringing
Absolutely.
a lot more experience to the table. And I think a lot of times when we hire someone, they may have been at a
Yeah.
prior company for
Right.
10 years, which is great, right? Deep, deep knowledge,
Yeah.
but one way of doing it. Someone with that fractional experience is bringing, oh, wait a minute, I've seen what good looks like there. That didn't work there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not sharing the,
No.
confidential information, but you're bringing that experience to the table
Yeah,
that really is
that used to
expansive.
be a tagline for consulting. You're bringing in a consultant to do something because they're an expert in that particular area. I think that's really can be said for fractional. One of the things, though, that I always get a little pushback on is, well, you don't know our organization very well. But keep in mind, you're hiring someone at a very high level that's worked at a high level. That's not a big burden for them to overcome. Like, we've seen organizations, we can pretty much put you in a certain bucket and go, okay, now I can deep dive if I need to in your particular use case. But 9 times out of 10, we know what a balance sheet looks like. We know, right? I mean, we know these things. We know, what a PRD looks like. We know what good looks like, to your point. And I think that's important for anybody hiring fractionals, that they understand that, hey, you're hiring somebody at such a level that you've probably never experienced before. So you should definitely give it a try. It's, in my experience, when I get on board with someone, I think they're very pleasantly surprised at the documentation I bring, at the depth of knowledge, at what I'm able to do, how I'm able to lead. And I'm sure the same could say it to you, Kathy, that they're like, you're not a consultant. No, I'm a fractional. It's much different. So
Yeah, because you're a team member. Like when I come in as a fractional, I've been fractional CPO, chief of staff, leadership development. Like I've come on as a team coach. That's one of my favorite, where I come in and can listen and help drive the change. And you are coming in this with you're able to pick it up quick, right? Because it's an experience thing. But you're able to see things others can't because you're not so entrenched.
Right, you don't have biases quite built in yet, because I think that's also to be said, like you have whatever relationships with some people, you feel like maybe they were wrong last quarter in their performance review. There's a lot to that, like that kind of wraps around a full-time employee, that we come in and we go, we're not pulled into that. We're not knowledgeable in that. We don't really, that's not really why we're there. So we're really focused on what can you provide, what's your performance like, and where can I help you, to get there, which is key. Yeah. So why do organizations sometimes resist strategic solutions even when they know the current system isn't working?
I think there's a couple of different reasons. One of them is people struggle, I think, being able to define what the strategy is. Sometimes I'll go into an organization and say, do you have a strategy? And they're like, yeah, we have a strategy, right? We're going to make $1 million or whatever the number is, right? Like, I'm like, that's not a strategy. But so I think knowing what a good strategy looks like. So a lot of people I don't think know what good looks like, right? And what is needed, for depending on what there's multiple different kind of strategies, right? So what is the strategy we're going after? Is it a technology strategy? Is it a process we want to, is it AI, which we could argue is technology or people, whichever way you want to go, right? But clearly articulating what the end looks like, I think people struggle. And it's so important for us as leaders to be able to clearly articulate, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what does it look like, and what's going to be different at the end of it? And if we're not able to clearly express that end vision, teams struggle. And, what happens is they pick on the easiest things to work on. This is right in front of me. I can go do this right now. I can get that done. That feels good. Or I'm under a lot of pressure and someone's telling me to do this, so let me do what I was told to do, as opposed to stop and think if it aligns to the bigger picture. So I think there's a lot of things that we're humans. We don't like change. You can add that into the whole thing as well. And we've got 1,000,001 things coming at us at once. And so we really have to stop sometimes and slow down to be able to really change what's already working. It may not be working well, but something's working, right? The business is still moving forward. So what you're asking us is to pivot, go faster, get somewhere better, but you're asking me to do that on top of my day job, which is already taking too long.
And change is hard. So I get that. And people are very resistant to change because it's hard. It's so much easier to be trenched into what I do every day, how I do it. So absolutely, I get that. And so, that kind of leads me into my next question. So you said something, leadership is really about followership. Yeah. Can you explain that philosophy to me?
Yeah. It's the way I look at it is that you can claim that you're a great leader. You can even get a boss to say you're good, but if the people that you're trying to influence to do things don't agree, if they don't get on board, if they're not following you to the next company, to the next, or inviting their friends to come work for your team,
Yeah.
you're not really a great leader, right? So that's why I say leadership
Yeah.
is about who follows you. And that's really the true sign if you're doing something well.
I couldn't agree more. We all have our experiences with that, and I think that's the telltale sign for sure. So I'm gonna make a bumper sticker on that one. So
I want to get like a Glassdoor rating. Like, would you follow this leader anywhere? And and it's really funny, Mike. It's very interesting. The leaders who I believe are aware and really focus on people first to drive performance. When we do a 360 with them, those people that are strong leaders will rate themselves almost all the time lower than their team members. The leaders that think they're fabulous and have no idea rate themselves higher than their team members. And so it's really interesting how often
a good strong leader always finds areas where they need improvement. They're not saying they're a bad leader. They're just saying, I could do better here. They're very critical of themselves, and which also buys back into why they're such a great leader, right? They're critical of themselves, meaning that I missed a 1-to-1 this week. I need to go back and get that. Those kind of things.
Yeah, they want to know where their blind spots are. What am I missing? What can I not see? Because there's so much going on that we have to manage. We're going to drop something. We're not perfect. We don't have all the answers.
So what's the biggest lie organizations tell themselves about leadership right now?
Biggest lie is there's a lot of them that they can hire talent, right? I can just go hire someone that's experienced, and that's going to work in our organization. And they assume that people will just be able to come in, they can plop them in, and they're going to do an amazing job. But you can't hire trust. You can't hire relationships. You can't hire culture. You have to bring people in and assimilate them and make sure that you're working on building that trust across an organization and a team. And I've seen so many leaders get really frustrated. Like, I hired the best person, the most expensive person.
And on paper, they looked really good and everything was a good match for that job description. So let me ask you, is our interview process broken?
I think it's a challenge at times. I think we're often in a rush. We have a lot of our own biases. I'm not even sure it's the interview process. I think it's the onboarding process that's really broken, because it's just because you got along with someone in the interview and you've done all of the filtering. If someone comes in and they have their own experiences and their own way of doing things that is counter to your culture, they're not going to be successful. And I think as leaders, we have to take the time. We have to have the one-on-ones. We need to think like you were talking about on the fractional leadership, right? When you bring someone in, you need to clearly define, what is your expectation? What's the role? What do I need from you? What does success look like? And then give them time to define, do the analysis. What's working? What's not? What else do you need? We often just bring someone in, plop them, and say, go.
And you expect them to tell me what I don't know. Like, you don't lead them to water. You pretty much say, there's water out there somewhere, but I need you to find it, and then bring it back, whatever the analogy is. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think in a lot of ways that when we start going down this road of interviewing and onboarding, we need, as leaders, we need to put our egos aside and go, I can make a bad hire decision and I need to let them go right away. I think for the most part, we keep people way too long. We hire too quickly for the wrong reasons. And then we just devastate teams doing that. So,
yeah. But I don't know the number, Mike, but it's quite high of the amount of executives and leaders that are hired that don't stay, right? And you have to stop and wonder, like, you did the interview. Is it really that we interviewed poorly? No, probably not. It's just that we haven't helped them come into our environment.
And the other side of that too is, you're talking about, leaders. Let's talk about the person being interviewed and hired. They sometimes uproot and they literally are going through and the other side of that, it too, is that we have, someone's being uprooted, they're being moved, their whole family's there, and they're hired, and then 30 days later, you're talking about a severance package for them, or you're exiting them out of the organization. Like, where's the breakdown there? How did that come about? And again, I think there's a lot to that. I think there's both sides of that, but I think, as the organization brings someone in, you have a lot of responsibility. I don't think leaders take enough of that responsibility, in my opinion, when they do that kind of stuff. So maybe that's another great fit too, Kathy, as you think about fractional, is like, if you're not 100% sure what role you want to fill here, bring in a fractional. It's the best of both worlds. You bring them in a short term, you bring them in with a small amount of hours, and then they can even help you find that full-time permanent fix. Like, who better than the person doing the job than to hire the right person to do that job? I mean, it makes perfect sense. So if anything, start thinking of fractional folks to help you onboard, bring someone in. That's a perfect fit for that.
It's funny. I'm just thinking of one of the clients that I worked with, and I came in as the team coach for a bit, and then the head of HR left, so I took on that role to find the replacement. Then I went into customer success and to find the replacement. And it is, when you're doing the job, it's easier to know what that job looks like, to then make sure you're hiring what truly is the job description, what really is needed, and who's going to be the best person.
And so again, like, I feel like sometimes I'm the HR recruiter, for the technical side of it. Like, we need an IT director. Okay, well, I know what an IT director looks like, and I know what it looks like specifically to this role, and and how that's going to work. And so I'm going to be like, I need someone that has a thick skin on them, because they're going to be critiqued on a regular basis, or that kind of, like, I can look at those things that just don't come out in a resume. They don't even come out necessarily in the first interview. Like, this is a sit down conversation, maybe a go to lunch type thing. Like, it might be multiple calls to them to really kind of figure out if what's on paper is really matching what they're saying, and then what you need as an organization. So those are really great observations. So why do leaders struggle to slow down and think clearly under pressure?
I think it's that natural tendency. We want to solve problems. Most of us want to be the heroes. Most of us want to get things done, get it off our checklist. There's a lot of pressure to say you have to deliver results. And so it feels like the best thing to do is just to keep going and pushing forward. And there's perceptions out there, right? If you're not running fast, you're not doing your job. But in reality, when you do take a moment, step back and breathe and look around, you go, oh my God, I took those 10 steps. If I had thought about this, I could have taken one and been twice as far. And that's the difference. I think as you move up the ranks, right, and have more and more responsibility, like, when we first started our jobs, right, we were told what to do. Right. And then hopefully someone gave us a little more confidence to know what it is and why to do it. It's very different as you continue to get more responsibility, more scope, that your job changes. It's not a job description of these are the 10 things you need to do. Your job is to be strategic. Your job is to figure out how to do things different, how to motivate your people. And that's a mind shift that, unfortunately, we don't do enough leadership development, quite honestly. 55% of managers have never received basic management training. So now think about, when you shift from your first line manager to your managing managers to your C-suite, how much training happened in there? What have we done to help people in that transition of being a doer to being the strategic thinker?
That's absolutely true. And and that kind of leads me into some of the industry insights that I wanted to talk with you about, because I think we're starting to see this shift. We've seen it for a little while, because generationally, younger generation stuff, they're looking at leaders differently. So do you think younger generations expect a different type of leadership? I mean, it's a softball question, but and it's funny, we're talking about this and we see that, but I don't think all leaders are seeing this, and I don't think organizations are seeing this yet. They're still trying to lead differently like they led 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And I'm starting to see that's not working. Like that's not working with these younger generations. So let's talk about that a little bit. What does some of that look like to you?
And some of it is good traits that I
Right.
love they're bringing into the workplace, right? They're more purpose driven than I think
Yeah.
we were when
Yeah.
we came,
Yeah.
you need a job, you need
Yeah.
money, you do what you're told, and you
Yeah.
heads down and do it. And I think we have a younger generation that wants to make sure that, yeah, I know I have to work, but I want to do something I love. I don't want to work
Yeah.
as much as my parents did, right? They grew up in environments where both parents typically were working. They weren't
Right.
necessarily home for them. And they're
Right.
saying, for what and why? Do I need to do that? And, and by the way, I think the younger generation is bringing more skills into the workplace than we
Absolutely. Yeah.
had when we brought in, right? When I hire an intern for me, I know he is or she is a heck of a lot
Right.
smarter when it comes to tools and how to get things done. But I've
Yeah.
got to let my ego go and say, yeah, someone younger than me knows more than me. And I think that's what the younger generation struggles because they look at me and say, you're a dinosaur and you won't
Right.
give me the credit. You won't. And it's like, okay, well, this is a two-way street. I have a lot of
Right.
experience you don't have. So I can bring the experience. You bring the new knowledge and the technology. But we have to figure out how to work better with people that are just have a lot of different needs. They're bringing a lot more
Yeah.
anxiety into the workplace, Mike, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So we're not
We're
used to
not
that,
used to
right?
all the stuff that surrounds. We used to have a very clear demarcation zone. Like when you opened the doors and went into work, you left all the personal stuff at home. And that now, in all honesty, I think we were a little naive to think that didn't really happen too. But because I would get on my bank, check my bank statement, do that. I was already bringing in personal stuff, like life. We're there 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, whatever. You're taking phone calls from your significant other. You're doing all kinds of stuff. So the fact that as an organization you think you can separate the two doesn't really happen. But aside from that, I think they're really just exposing that the two mesh more than anybody wants to believe. Like you literally, I've had cases where people would use their business email to do personal stuff. Like it meshed too much sometimes. But to my point, I think we're bringing up an idea that as a leader, you need to be better at your job. Like you need to lead them from their front door to your front door at the organization. Like it's all the way through. So, if they're not having a good day at home or they're having troubles at home, you probably should know about that and at least help guide them as a leader. I mean, you don't have to counsel them or anything, but you be a good leader. Like they're struggling as a person. You need to have something in your tool bag that helps them get through those types of personal things as well. And I don't think as a leader we do enough of that. I really do think we think leadership starts when they come in and sit down at the desk, and it's way before that. So
I agree, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about this idea. Like, you need to have both. You need to be performance oriented. We have to drive outcomes, but we have to do it by taking care of our people, right? It's not this either or. Where I think there's a lot of leaders that are like, oh, I have to take care of my people and I have to make sure they're safe and they feel good. No, we have a business to run. We have to deliver results. That's the job of the team. My job as a leader is to help people and hold them accountable and help them get past whatever is going on. But it's not an either or choice.
Well, yeah, and I think that point is like a lot of times you need to just have that sit down with the team and go, look, we really need to get beyond this because we all want to get paid, right? In the end, this organization is here to make money and pay our salaries so that we can go home and pay our mortgages and our car payments and all that. So let's put that has to happen. So everybody needs to meet their deadline for no other reason than we need to do that. Like that sits right at home. And then after that, now we need to talk about how efficiently you can do it and what's holding you up. What's the blockers that aren't allowing you to get there? Yeah, and then work through that. And so And that kind of reminds me of this one thing I was going to mention to you, ask you about. We were talking a little bit. It says, why are authenticity and mentorship becoming more important in organizations? So that kind of leads into that. So I know how I mentored and how I led, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
I think it comes down to that
Yeah.
the line has blurred, right? This is now personal, and if we need to connect to people's hearts so that they will do what we need them to do. Because anything that's going to be logic driven is probably going to be
Yeah.
able to be
Yeah.
done by AI, right? We need people that are going to be showing up, thinking differently, being more critical in their thinking, right? So we need to be connecting and using the
Yeah.
emotional side of things. That's going to be the differentiator in work. And so, how do you connect to the hearts of someone? You can't
You
show up
can't
as a
fake it,
robot.
for sure.
You can't
I
just
mean, people see right through a fake,
no.
lack of interest or empathy, right? You have to show up, you have to be there, and your heart has to be in the right place. So
Absolutely. And that's the authenticity part is like know who you are, do what you say you're going to do, ask
yeah.
questions, learn about your team. What motivates them? Why do they want to be here? You've talked numerous times now. We said in
Yeah.
the earlier, like
Right.
what's in it for me, the whip 'em.
Yeah.
How do you learn that?
Yeah.
You have to ask a question. You have to ask personal.
Yeah.
Tell me about what did you do this weekend, Mike?
Right.
What's really important to you?
Generate that conversation and let them tell you their story. Absolutely. So we hit that part of the podcast where I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions. And so try the best to just answer them. I think they really resonate with you as a leader, so I think they'll be okay. So question number one, what's one myth about leadership you wish people would stop believing?
That there's a mold of what a
Okay.
good leader
Yeah.
looks like. Be yourself, be authentic, and care about your people
Absolutely.
to drive results.
What's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Treat everyone with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
Came from my father. He went from the mailroom to the president of the company. And all along the way, he treated everyone
I
with
love
dignity
that.
and respect.
That's so true. Like you can live by that. What leadership habit creates the biggest long-term impact?
Self-reflection. When you can understand who you are, how you like to show up, you can have a better respect of how you're then perceived, and people see that, and then you can start to see patterns and ask questions of others. And awareness is, I think, one of the most important leadership skills any leader can learn
Okay.
and continue
Final
to
question.
develop.
What's one trait every successful leader needs?
I already said awareness. What's one trait? I think it's remembering that we're in a people business.
Relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
Connect
Absolutely.
to the hearts of the people.
Yeah. In the end, that's what we're all in for. Like it is all a people business. However you want to put it, it ends up being people. So if someone listening feels stuck in a toxic workplace or struggling in leadership, what's the first step they should take?
Step back and ask yourself, what would you love? What is it that you truly are looking for, whether it's a job, whether it's a lifestyle? Because I think we make too many assumptions that we have to be doing something. And we need to just pause and reflect and think about what we love because we might actually be 80% there already and we're complaining about 20%. And there's ways to change that. So I think it's always about grounding. What would you love? If you could do anything, what would it be? And then look at, can I change it? Do I need to change it? Or do I, maybe it's you change yourself as opposed to trying to
because we
change
do
someone
hyper
else.
focus on that 20%. And we need to get a perspective. Absolutely. So where can people learn more about you, your book, and the E3 Leadership Code?
Sure, they can find me at kathyeastwood.com. And, the E3 Leadership Code, we didn't get a chance to talk about it much, Mike, but it really is a repeatable system for all the things you and I spoke about today, which is if you're missing one of these elements in the E3 Leadership Code, express, engage, execute, or the emotional intelligence, that's when you're going to fail to deliver results. So the idea here is to make sure you have something to come back to ground you in the basics, and so that you can be part of the 30% of people that actually achieve their goals repetitively, because we're always missing one of those key elements. So yeah, kathyeastwood.com, you can learn more about me and the book. Called a human
Okay.
approach to high
Well, it was an
performance.
honor having you on my show. I really appreciate it. It was an amazing conversation, and thank you again for coming on. My audience, absolutely,
Thanks.
absolutely. For my audience, if you like this show, please share it. Get it out there for the rest of the people that kind of catch up on. Again, thank you, Kathy, for coming on, and thank you, audience, for listening.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Follow the show for more conversations on leadership, faith, and resilience. Sponsored by Alamo Tech and Mission Solution Partners.